May 24th, 2005. I'm Ted Koppel, and this is Nightline. Tonight, the tangled web of science, ethics, and politics. And joining me now, Lee Silver. He is a genetics professor at Princeton University and someone we've turned to over the years to help us understand some of the new frontiers of science. But let me begin with the issue of ethics. I must say I'm a little bit concerned about leaving some of these ethical considerations not necessarily to our British friends or our German friends or even our Korean friends, but if you put no ethical limits on that kind of research, you're asking for trouble, aren't you?
Yes, I would agree. And the best way to put ethical limits on the research is to have it completely transparent, funded by the government, like all other biomedical research. And when government funding takes place, government regulations take hold, and that allows the research to be done in an ethical manner.
It may allow it to be done in an ethical manner, but if you have federal government research limitations, don't you then just have another batch of problems that are going to limit the kind of work that you can do?
Oh, absolutely. It's very clear that even though the United States spends far more in biomedical research than any other country, and Europe also spends a lot of money, the two most important advances in embryo stem cells and cloning have come out of South Korea. So clearly, if the United States puts too many restrictions on this research, funds and people are going to go elsewhere.
And then what?
Well, then the research will be conducted basically in Asia, where people don't have as much of a problem with this research as Westerners tend to have.
You were just about to say, and then I could see you catching yourself, where they don't have the same ethical considerations. You weren't really going to say that, were you?
No, I don't think that is correct. I think that we're seeing different senses of spirituality or ethics in the United States and in Asia because we have very different religious traditions. And I think the research in Asia will be done ethically, but they don't see human embryos in the same light as we do in America or Europe.
From a practical point of view, some of my conservative friends tell me there really isn't that much difference between stem cells that are recovered from the umbilical cord and adult stem cells, that much of the research that we are trying to do can be done from those.
I disagree with that. The embryonic stem cell has the potential to become every tissue and organ in the body if you can figure out what factors to give it. And adult cells, so far, umbilical cells, just don't have that potential. And then there's the other problem, of course, which is it's too late to isolate my umbilical cord or yours. So what are we going to do if we need stem cell therapy?
Well, wait a second. If we were dependent upon stem cells that were harvested from ourselves in whatever form, we'd be plumb out of luck, wouldn't we? I mean, why does harvesting stem cells from an embryo offer us more of an opportunity?
It only does when that embryo is created out of cells from the patient, him or herself. And that's what the South Koreans announced this past Friday. The ability to take cells from patients and turn those cells into embryos, which could be converted into stem cells. And when then those stem cells are put back into the patient sees those cells as part of itself and won't reject those cells. And that's the best possible way in which this research is going to actually come out in clinical applications.
Professor Silver, the minute you start saying embryo, my mind transposes from embryo to tiny little living creature, soon to be a baby.
Yes, and we have to understand that when you have an embryo in a petri dish, it cannot possibly become a fetus or a baby. That could only happen if the embryo was placed into a woman's womb. And to make sure that doesn't happen, because Americans are not in favor of that, we need to have transparent research, which could be accomplished if we had government funding in this country.
One of the interesting questions, of course, that is raised is those fundamentalists, for example, who acknowledge that in vitro fertilization is a perfectly appropriate thing to do. clearly they would have some problems, I suppose, with how the unused but fertilized eggs are disposed of. I am told by English friends that in the UK, for example, they are far more conservative, not politically, but conservative in terms of the number of eggs that are fertilized, precisely because they consider that to be a problem. In this country, I'm told we have 400,000 fertilized eggs that have not been used.
Yes, that's correct. And the interesting thing about the research coming out of South Korea is they were able to derive new stem cell lines using just 11 eggs isolated from a woman per line. And that's a remarkable increase in efficiency over the last couple of years.
But what do you say about the 400,000? I mean, the president today was calling for, quite literally, the adoption, I think, of some of these fertilized eggs.
Well, the problem with the bill passed by Congress, which I think is a great first step, is that it's already behind the times compared to what the South Koreans can do. The South Koreans have shown that the best way to make this technology efficient is to use eggs from women between 21 and 30 years old, not to use frozen embryos left over from IVF clinics. And so really the right way to do this research is to use young, fresh eggs, and that way you won't have that many. And that is the advance that took place today took place last week in South Korea.
Very quickly, Professor Silver, do you see within the academic community a brain drain where American scientists truly are leaving in great numbers to go work elsewhere?
Well, it's very interesting because there's already a documented brain drain from most of the country to California, because California, as you know, wants to put a lot of money into this research. I think that if we still have the limitations that we have, people will move to Asia. Singapore in particular, where English is the first language, is very attractive, and already a number of scientists from the West have gone there.
Professor Lee Silver, thanks so much for joining us.
You're very welcome.